first of all, hello everyone. My name is Christian Letelier, and I wanted to welcome you to the first CMPC Sustainability webinar for the European region, which is named A Look at Our Present to Continue Building the Future. So in this opportunity, we have Nicolas Quorum, who is the head of the CMPC Sustainability Department. He will give you a complete overview of what CMPC's sustainability strategy is. He will speak also about the long-term goals and sustainability value chain, among other things. So this is a presentation that will take about 45 minutes. And after the presentation, we will have about 10-15 minutes for question and answer. So please prepare your questions during the presentation to respond them, so we can respond them at the end. Now I leave you with Nicolas. Nicolas, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Christian. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Perfectly.
Great. So good afternoon to everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I am sitting here in a cold, rainy morning in Santiago, Chile, but we have CMPC representatives in Europe as well joining us, and of course you, the audience, are the key players of this conversation this morning. Martin is going to help me with the slides, so maybe Martin, we can move on to the contents of this morning. As Cristian said, I am Nicolas Gordon. I am the Sustainability Director for CMPC, and our small department leads the strategy and the implementation of CMPC's sustainability program, but really this is an effort that is broad and is driven by the actions of our over 19,000 collaborators on a daily basis in 8 countries and in several continents. So what we're going to talk briefly today about is first an in-depth look at CMPC's sustainability strategy. We're also going to talk a little bit about the sustainability from the perspective of our operations, our products in the entire value chain. We have some goals that we'd like to talk about and reflect on how our performance has been so far. A little bit about some sector initiatives that we're involved in the space of sustainability. I think it's very important to understand that this is something that is not driven only within, but also in collaboration with sectors, initiatives, and at regional levels as well. And lastly, I think a little bit of future perspectives. I think it's always good to think about how through sustainability we're able to provide better options for customers, for clients as we look to the future, and taking into account as well global mega trends, etc. So Martin, please let's go to the next one. So this is a busy slide. I start by apologizing for that, but we're trying to really condensate in one slide, I think, the main pillars of our corporate strategy. CMPC as a company, not just the sustainability strategy, but really the business strategy of our company is driven by these 5 pillars that you see at the top of the slide. So productivity, efficient growth, our people, innovation, and sustainability. And this sounds pretty straightforward, but I think it's very important to reflect on the fact that sustainability is not CSR, corporate sustainability responsibility initiatives. It's not something on the side, but it's really core to the strategy, to the business strategy of our company. Okay, and that is something that I think is a shift that we've seen over the last decade in companies where sustainability sort of lived in parallel and was on different tracks than the strategy of companies, and we see leaders in the space really starting to integrate the sustainability into daily decisions of the business. Our approach begins with a purpose that we've established a few years ago that has to do with the culture of sustainability at CMPC. We call this purpose the 3 C's. It's create, it's conserve, and it's coexist. You see there in the graphic on on the right, how we've done an initial alignment with the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. This is sort of the global framework with obviously these very distinctive icons that have provided, I think, a common language for not only companies but other institutions and civil society and governments to begin speaking about these gaps in terms of sustainable development that we face as humanity, and speak to these gaps within common language and common indicators. So I think it's very, very relevant to understand what sort of the global framework is. Of course, companies are a part of this, and this is how we begin from a very high level perspective, drawing our sustainability strategy. Then I would say we pass down to things that are much more at the core of CMPC, are ESG material issues. So we've gone through a very exhaustive material issues process of mapping these materials issues in the second half of 2018. Some of these topics are listed there in the middle in this list. You see we've associated our corporate purpose to many of these different material topics that go from anywhere from innovation and product quality all the way through, you know, corporate citizenship and local development and social aspects, and finally everything around, you know, conserving our environment, whether it's ecosystem protection and conservation, forest management, obviously very, very relevant in our company, climate change, etc. We've established sustainability goals, long-term sustainability goals, and we think that's a driver to action. And this is what really has begun a widespread implementation throughout the company in different business units and in different levels of the organization. We're all aligned behind these common goals. What is the objective? Ultimately, it has to do with creating shared value for all of CMPC's stakeholders and the entire value chain. That is, I think, the ultimate purpose of embedding sustainability within the strategy, again, and not being sort of this just CSR initiative on the side. Of course, it is very important to report on progress and ideally this being a very transparent practice where we're not necessarily only highlighting those things where we're doing well, but also those things where we still have a lot to improve. And hopefully through these reportings, we are communicating to you, our customers, with what we plan to do. So what are sort of the roadmaps and those aspects where we might not be yet at the forefront in those issues. Let's move on, Martin. So I think when you think about a strategy in a company, it's absolutely fundamental to begin with a strong governance for sustainability. This is why in 2019, we established as a company a board level committee that oversees the implementation of the strategy and ensures achieving the relevant goals and objectives that we have in this matter. So you see the members of this committee, of course, our president, 2 board directors, our CEO, chief corporate affairs officer, myself, and our chief environmental officer. We meet on a bi-monthly basis, and I can say that there's high level from the very top of the company oversight of what we're doing in terms of our strategy and how we're implementing and how we're doing, you know, how our progress is looking towards our goals. So this high standard of corporate governance, I think, is the first step to ensuring that what we say is going on at CMPC is actually having a visibility from the board down. Of course, we are focused on making sure that the very base of our strategy has to do with strict ethics and compliance with laws and regulations in each country where we operate. This is, of course, not a guarantee of sustainable operations, but it is no doubt a must and a base to build on for when it comes to developing a broader strategy. Respect for the people, dignity and the rights, and the environment, of course, at the center of our board's oversight. Excuse me. So this is obviously a very busy slide. There's probably a little chance that you can read what's on it, but really the focus of showing this is what we've called our value creation model. You can see this in full display in our integrated report and with much more detail. But the purpose is really showing you how we've been looking at the different business units of our company, our activities, our products, our byproducts, and the entire value chain, and how we operate as a vertical integrated company. So we start with all the inputs that come from forests, and then we go through the different business units of CMPC, whether it's pulp, whether it's timber, whether it's our packaging division or our tissue division, and really looking at all the synergies and all the opportunities within CMPC and also with external partners when it comes to circular economy, when it comes to developing innovative new products and so forth. So we look at this as a model, as a diagram where we have inputs that have to do with business, financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual, human, natural capital, and all these inputs that come into this model. And then we look at what are the outputs, right? In those same categories. So I think this is a really interesting, broad way of understanding how we are structured, how we operate within the purpose of the company, and how we have interactions again that are within or external to our company. Again, this is in our integrated report, so we'll make sure to pass on number of links where you can access this report and make sure that you can take perhaps a deeper look into this and understand material topics are also listed and highlighted within this value creation model. Next slide, please. So when we think of sustainability, typically we're thinking economic, social, environmental. These are sort of the core pillars of sustainability when we think about it broadly. And I think this is at a very general level. This is what we look at in particular in the operations of CMPC. So of course we begin by focusing on minimizing those negative impacts and risks that our company might be facing associated to social or environmental areas. And then we move on to looking how we can achieve opportunities and enhance those positive impacts that have to do with these areas as well. So to name a few, within the social realm, we obviously have a deep look into our people, and there you see in blue highlighted diversity and inclusion. This is because we have a long-term goal in terms of diversity and inclusion at CMPC. We look at our supply chain, whether it's up or downstream, our communities, of course, and then clients and consumers. Here we also have a highlighted sub-theme there, which is innovative and value-added product, which is one of our long-term innovation goals that was announced and established in 2020. When we move on to the environmental dimension, I think these are not surprising to anyone, but I would say we focus our attention into the forest ecosystem and the sustainable management, certifications, conservation efforts. We have a long-term goal there. It has to do with conserving an additional significant portion of land. We look at water. We also have a goal there around water efficiency, energy, everything around efficiency and renewable energy within our operations. Emissions, obviously, I'd say the elephant in the room when it comes to the challenges we're facing in terms of sustainability, especially environmental today, with just increasing scientific evidence that we are reaching really the limits of what our planet can withhold without transforming these emissions into impacts that will affect societies greatly in the future. And obviously, waste is another topic that we are very concerned in looking at, and we also have a goal around that. I'll explain and I'll dive a little deeper into those goals in a few more slides. Next slide, please. So this is a broad overview of what our, I guess, sustainability goals are today. We've established these goals within the time frame of 2019 and 2020. So we have a year and a half, 2 years of progress so far. So we're happy to begin reporting on how we are doing in some of these different areas. We don't have enough data yet to be reporting on innovation, so we'll have to bring that to you back again next year when we meet for our second annual virtual encounter. But I'll briefly touch on what we're looking in terms of innovation. So we want to make sure that we have 30% of our process improvements by 2025 should come from digital innovation and use of data. So we created a new unit within the innovation department that's going to be looking specifically into data management and how that can help us achieve process improvements, which of course later have significant, whether it's environmental or social impacts coming along with that. We want to make sure that 20% of the actions that we will have to drive forward to meet our environmental goals have to do with innovative solutions that perhaps we are not applying today within our company. That it has to do with the ambition of our environmental goals. These are very ambitious yet realistic goals, and there's no way of achieving these goals if we don't really look into driving more innovation, more research within our company. And we want to make sure also that a significant percentage of our sales by 2025 of our three big business units comes from new products that we were not producing at the beginning of this decade. As I said, we hope to be reporting on progress on these next year or by the end of 2021. When it comes to coexisting or our social environment, if you will, we have 2 goals when it comes to gender equity and diversity. So we are showing some of the progress there, which has to do with increasing the number of women within our organization by 50% by 2025. These are based on our 2018 baseline, and also increasing the number of women in management positions by 50% by 2025. On the right side, you can see our progress so far. So I think we're on track, and we're making some interesting progress there, working hand on hand with our people department within the company. Achieve 2.5% of workforce with people with disabilities by 2.5 by 2025. I'm sorry, is also another of our goals. Extremely challenging because there's a lot of training that has to do and development that has to do outside of just the company's influence in order to prepare these people and have them integrated into the workforce. So our progress perhaps is a little slower in this area, but we are putting a lot of effort and attention into being the most diverse and inclusive company that we can by 2025. In terms of health and security, of course, we want to have 0 fatalities and 0, serious accidents in our operations, whether it's our own people or contractors and third-party service companies that we work with. So in 2020, we had a great year. We had no fatalities to report on. And unfortunately, we've had 1 fatality this year. So this is an annual, obviously, goal that we track on every year, but we make sure that we're taking action and the higher standards and certifications every year to ensure that health and safety of our people are the forefront of our work. When it comes to environmental performance, water, we want to reduce our water intensity use by 25% by 2025. We've done good progress in the first couple of years of this goal, and this is just really operational adjustments because we have in the pipeline some interesting capital projects that will really start driving the speed in achieving this goal. When it comes to emissions, we have a science-based target of reducing by 50% our greenhouse gas emissions, direct and indirect emissions, by 2030. And we've also done some pretty good progress so far, and I'm pretty hopeful that we will meet our 2030 goal, if not before 2030. When it comes to waste, perhaps one goal that most people think is the most ambitious is achieving zero waste to final disposal by 2025 through the reduction of waste generation or the recovery of byproducts and really diving into what is known as the circular economy. And we've done very, very interesting progress here, especially where our pulp mills have done some interesting collaboration with third parties and finding innovative ways of valorizing our byproducts and waste and diverting significant amounts of waste from final disposal landfills. And finally, when it comes to conservation, we said we were going to add another 100,000 hectares to roughly 325,000 hectares that we had by 2018 that were set aside for conservation protection purposes. So our goal is to reach roughly 420,000 hectares by 2030 that will be fully dedicated to that. We are in parallel as we speak working on a conservation strategy which will deliver really all the work that was going to be done in these areas for the company in coming years. So when we look at our operations, I guess we can again look at sort of the social, the environmental, and the governance or economic dimensions. But we can also, I think, look at CMPC. We look at sustainability from a perspective of our operations, our products, in our broader value chain. When we look at products, I think at the center of we're looking at creating sustainable and value-added products for more demanding and active consumers. A space that you all know very well with demands and needs and regulations changing at a very fast pace. And I think when we do a deep dive into our products, we try to highlight some of the attributes that we believe CMPC's product offering has, and where we also expect to do a lot of work in coming years. So to begin with, we're in the space of producing natural renewable products that come from raw materials from the forest, right? So certified forest for us, traceability are key things that have to do with our current model. But we're very interested in moving forward into the whole space of biomaterials and what could be developed in that space. And our R&D department and innovation division are working pretty heavily in those areas. As I mentioned before, we are a company that has circular sort of base processes. So within CMPC, many of our plants move byproduct that's used as inputs, as raw materials for one mill or one factory, when it's actually the byproduct or waste of another one. So there's immense potential within CMPC to do small scale circular approaches, and we expect to do it also with the broader value chain of the company, looking into ways of developing products that deliver options that can be recyclable, compostable, etc. And these are products that are focused on our clients, but at the same time we understand as products things that can be valuable within the company for all the different subsidiaries of CMPC. So our products are bio-based, and this is a very interesting time, I think, for mass timber and housing and buildings. We've done some interesting moves, and I think in this space in the last years, and I'll speak a little bit to that later on. But this is, I think, we see huge potential in sustainable construction and as an alternative to, concretes and steel and traditional building materials that are used, at least in this part of the world and in other parts of the world as well. Our products are pretty essential. They're focused on genuine necessities of people's daily needs, and therefore we think there is a social sort of contribution to bringing these products that are available, that are high quality to people's daily needs, that have to do with hygiene, personal care, and even now with the pandemic, we've seen the role of fiber-based products in, for example, health, products, sanitary masks, and even packaging that's sort of replaced the availability of going to restaurants or stores or whatnot. So the delivery space has really sort of also boomed in the last year and a half. So pretty essential, again, to people's daily necessities. And finally, I think we've already touched on this a little bit, but we really want to focus on the innovation of our products, make sure that they're high quality as always, and added value. So we're really bringing extra value to the table for our customers and clients. And there's a number of initiatives listed down there that I think will drive from the innovation sort of the pace in coming years in this sense. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna talk briefly about long-term partnerships. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I think this is important to understand. It's something that you cannot do alone, and not only that, when done in partnership, the results and the outputs are typically even better than the sum of individual efforts. So CMPC has been a member of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development since 2011. Since that year, we've also been core members of the Forest Solutions Group, really the group at the forefront of sustainability within our sector. And we've developed in the last few years, I think, a series of very interesting documents that have to do with these topics that we've been covering through this presentation. A roadmap for the forest sector to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, that was presented by Francisco Arceo at the United Nations a couple of years ago. We developed, in partnership with Boston Consulting Group, a circular bioeconomy report that really dives into the potential into driving a circular bioeconomy from the forest sector. And we are currently co-leading a net zero roadmap for the forest sector, along with Mondi, Hancock, and Stora Enso. And we are about to launch that report at COP26 in Glasgow in a few weeks. So very excited with that first phase. This is phase one of a project that has to do with a shared narrative around what net zero means for our sector. And then we will move later on next year into a phase two, which is developing a practical guide of implementation of net zero strategies within the forest sector. Another very interesting initiative I think is worth mentioning is we're working we sit at the advisory committee, in global advisory committee of development of the new greenhouse gas protocol guidelines for the land sector and removals, which is expected to be launched by Q4 of 2022. This is critical because this will be the guide for companies like us to actually be able to understand how to measure and how to report on a set of scope 3 emissions, indirect emissions that today are not particularly broadly understood and standardized in the world. So this will give us, for example, the ability to measure and integrate into our inventories the potential of carbon capture of our forests, the potential of capture and storage of our products, especially those timber-based products that are, long-lived. So there's a number of benefits that I think that we will see, and it's also a guide that is designed to drive and deliver action and some positive outputs when it comes to climate action. So very, very interesting work led by WRI, and as I said, in early next year, we will be piloting some of the new methodologies in Brazil and in Chile in our own forestry operations, providing some feedback to be integrated lastly in the final version of this report. Hopefully by 2023, we will be using these new guidelines and reporting at a much larger and system-based approach our emissions and our carbon captures. Next slide, please. I mentioned the SDG roadmap report. This is a report that was launched in 2019, and we've established a number of KPIs to track progress towards these impact opportunities that were outlined in this report. These opportunities are on the left there. So opportunities around working forests, bioeconomy, circularity, climate, water, people, communities, and procurement. And you see in the middle there the specifics of each target, and then the group average, which is all the members of Forest Solutions Group, and then the very far right you see sort of CMPC's performance. I think it's interesting here to see that in some areas we are behind sort of this group average, and in other areas we're actually at the forefront of what's being done, I think, globally by these leaders in our sector. So when it comes to working forests, for example, we have currently 90% of our plantations certified FSC or PEFC. We are about to finalize the certification of our forests in Argentina with FSC by the end of this year. Therefore, we will reach 99%. So we are slightly below that sector average, but we will actually be slightly ahead by the end of this year. In bioeconomy, I think it's interesting. This is very hard to measure, but the total revenues invested sort of in R&D for the bioeconomy, I think very driven by the Nordics and Scandinavian companies. We've tried to sort of identify what's being invested in. I think there's an opportunity there for putting more effort into developing R&D within the space of the bioeconomy. Same with circularity. I think we still have a lot of opportunity there, and I'm hopeful that some of our goals will be, sort of catalyzers of this extra action that's needed. When it comes to climate, I think it's very interesting to see that in general our performance is very good. So, for example, we have roughly 0.25 tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of saleable product, when the group's average is close to 0.7. So I think we have a very, very good performance today, and that doesn't take into account our efforts with our very ambitious goal. So we should be looking at something like 0.12 tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of saleable product by the end of this decade, which is really going to be a best practice in our sector globally. When we look at water, I think Chile is a place where we are confronting a lot of water scarcity and future scenarios that are not looking too great. Fortunately, today we only operate in 4% of our operations are in areas that are considered high water stress today. But that's not necessarily the situation in the future. So we are looking at risk, we are looking at the climate models, and we're making sure that we're taking action and preparing ourselves and not be vulnerable to those risks in the future. And we have water reduction plans pretty much in every single facility in our company. We invest, I think this is, and something happened with our people numbers there in the table. For some reason, they're not appearing, so I apologize for that. But I'm sure we'll circulate this presentation later to everyone, and we'll add those numbers. When it comes to communities, we invest roughly double what the average is invested in our sector in communities. So I think there's a huge social contribution that now we are trying to drive even further with the measurement of impact of all the social contributions, projects, and initiatives that CMPC develops primarily in Brazil and in Chile to make sure that the outputs of these projects are the expected and align with the objectives of these projects in the first place. When it comes to procurement, we have a very, very high percentage of certified wood and fiber, and we're hoping to really drive those numbers even further up, because we understand that traceability of fiber and wood products is absolutely key, especially in European markets, because of new upcoming regulations that will look very deeply into that. Next slide, please. Some future perspectives. I think these are a few examples. This is, of course, just a little preview, but beyond a massive project that we undertook last year to look at what we see as the next 100 years of our company. So CMPC in 2020 became a 100-year company, and we did this very extensive work to understand what are the priorities for our people and where do we see ourselves moving towards, and what we should be known for in the future. So many different initiatives have come from the Beyond projects, ideas and deep dives into these 10 or several areas that we are working on. But very interesting topics. Just to name a few here, what's the future going to look like in terms of management of forestry assets, right? We know we're going to compete with agriculture, with animal stock, with land use, and we need to really look forward and understand how we are going to be able to provide high quality fiber with a world that's demanding more and more resources that are delivered through land. Sustainable and smart packaging, water. It's essential for people. How can we be less dependent on our water use, right? Deep sustainability. What do we mean by that? We are leading a project that's called Decision Making and Sustainability. So how can we affect the decision making of our company with better outputs that have to do with sustainability, and ideally better outputs for the business as well? Client-centric, right? How do we deliver the best solutions? We're the best partner for our clients. Data, we already talked about this, and new and agile ways of working. So these are really sort of cut edge, I think, interesting topics that we're working on through groups that were formed with people from all areas of the company. So these are groups that are comprised by the best talent of CMPC and come from all sorts of areas that we believe are needed in driving these projects. CMPC Ventures, a new division that was created last year under the umbrella of the innovation department, is going to look into impacting and investing in startups in a few areas that you see there on the slide, and really trying to drive sort of new ideas and new partnerships for our company, with the agility and the brains that you see in sort of the startup world globally. And recently we announced the sort of this joint venture, new form, a new company that will center in the construction center with products like laminated timber, cross-laminated timber, glue laminated timber, etc., to really start driving the conversation when it comes to building with timber. A few years ago, we built our corporate headquarters in Los Angeles, in the south of Chile, 100% mass timber building, and we're very happy to sort of be leading that conversation in Latin America. Next slide, please. This change, pretty rough changing gears here, but I think it's always important, again, to go back to that notion of how do we really connect this to the core of the business. So since 2017, we've been working pretty heavily in integrating green financing tools into the capital availability of our company and other debt instruments that typical companies like us typically use. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but I think it's very interesting to sort of look a little deeper into these last two instruments that we developed in 2020 last year and this year, in April this year, we issued the first sustainability linked bond. This was a 500 million allocation in the New York Stock Exchange. It got the best rate that a bond has, an issuance in the US has had for CMPC. So financially, it's really the best bond allocation, and it also happens to be a green instrument. So this is where we see sort of the win-win, right? So our CFO is happier than ever because he's getting, you know, the best conditions for this credit, and we're happy because this sustainability linked bond is linked to our performance in emissions and in water, which means that in 2025 we will have to meet a certain pathway that was agreed upon the issuance of this instrument. If we do not meet that performance, the rate of our coupons have a bump. So this is where companies, I think, really can show that their performance and their goals are true, and everybody behind our company is behind these achieving these goals. If we don't do that, we will actually have higher cost of credit in our company. So I think those are really interesting ways of understanding how sustainability really can sort of be embedded in throughout different areas of the company, and really is strategic to the way that we operate. And I think to end the presentation, and by no means this is something that we're showing here to sort of brag or anything about that, but I think what we're trying to achieve is, broadly speaking, overall good performance when it comes to all this ocean of ESG indices and recognitions and evaluations and questionnaires that we get every month, and that are you know, known globally. So, you know, MSCI and the Dow Jones in the United States, European-based FTSE4Good, and Vigeo Eiris are I think some good examples of those ratings or ESG indices that are listing us. And I think the message behind this is that we are consistently coming up through the evaluation of different groups, different organizations with different methodologies, is a leader in our sector. And I think that's the takeaway, is that on average, we come up as a strong company that's looking into this, that is managing the risk, that is understanding the potential, and is, you know, aiming to achieve sort of the best standard globally when it comes to sustainability. The number of recognitions that we've achieved, I think that the takeaway here is always what we can do better, and how do we consistently keep this as a sort of permanent output of our performance, and really gives sort of a third party guarantee that what we say is actually what's being read and what's being understood by other experts in the markets. So I think that's Martinez. This is the last slide, I believe it is. Yeah. So that's again a very brief, I think, overview, a little bit of everything here. We wanted to do a very high level sort of introductory conversation with you. The most important part is perhaps now opening the microphone and hearing your comments, your questions, your concerns, and we hope that this can be an initiative that we continue having, you know, once, maybe perhaps twice a year, focusing perhaps on some more specific questions and concerns you might have. So with that, I thank you again for joining us today, and Christian, I leave you to lead the Q&A section.
Sure. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you for the very comprehensive conversation. So we have touched the 4 points that we mentioned at the beginning. So we talk about the CMPC sustainability strategy, about the long-term goals, about the sustainability value chain from end to end, and also about some sectors and initiatives. So now is the time for you guys to make your questions. If you have any question, concern, please feel free to to ask Nicolas now? Well, I'm going to start with something. So, Nicolas, today, the sustainability requirements are becoming more and more strict. Okay, I can speak because well, we travel across the region in Europe, you know, and the governments, all the regulations are becoming very, very strict, and it seems that that there's always something new. So, how do you see what are the major challenges that you see for the next years? You know, related to supplier, customers, government, regulations in general?
That's a great question. I think companies just have to really have antennas and have a really good reading of a number of different factors that at the end of the day add up to what you should be doing and looking at in terms of sustainability. You mentioned regulations, and of course, regulations are something that we need to be very aware of. As a global company, we're not only looking to new regulations in the European Union, we have to look at the US or Asia or Latin America. Typically, Europe is leading the way in this sense, but it's not necessarily that the norm always. And so that's the entire sort of regulatory space, right? It's sort of the compliance. It's sort of let's make sure that the minimum is covered. But as I said, I think in previous slides, that is short from being, you know, a guarantee of, you know, outputs that you would consider sustainable. So sustainability really is results. We are working towards providing results, outputs from our activities, our operations, our products, etc., that you can imagine as them, you know, being perpetual. I can do this for a long time because I'm not compromising. I'm not putting at risk the resources that I depend on. I have a strong value chain. I'm complying with regulations. You know, I'm flexible and adaptable enough to sort of match consumer demands, which we know are very fast paced. And sometimes for a company the size of CMPC, it's not easy to be quick and lean and adaptable. That's why I think, for example, CMPC Ventures is a great idea of saying, how can we get some of that leanness and sensors in spaces where sometimes being a larger company is just challenging by nature. You know, we compete in a world where there's a number of companies that are born providing the solution to a problem, right? So we identify a problem within the sustainability space or within the recycling space or within the circular economy space, and we developed a company or a product or a solution that's addressing that particularly. That's not really how we were born. We were born 101 years ago with the sole mission of making paper from straw, with very different technologies, with very different world. But CMPC has been able to go through all these changes in the last century, I think successfully adapting and understanding what are these forces that companies are facing. And I think sustainability is one of these new forces that is coming up with a lot of attention in the last few years. And ultimately, I think when you have a strong governance, when you have a strong strategy with long-term goals, when you have room to be flexible and adapt along the way, really this program just provides more resilience to risk. It provides more opportunities for the future. So overall, I think as frightening as some of these conversations may sound, I'm pretty optimistic that you know, driving sustainability in the way that we are attempting to is really nothing but doing better our job.
Thank you. Any other question from the pulp industry, probably regarding sustainability or or things that you would like to clarify based on Nicolas' presentation?
Yeah, I would like to ask Nicolas to explain a little bit more regarding the result. It's very easy to talk about sustainability and to promote your position, and you are let's say, try to sell your company as a green company doing a lot of marketing, but a very few real work behind. So I have heard several companies, marketing themselves like net zero or whatever, which seems a little bit light today because if I understand correctly, it's very difficult to be able to say that because there is no base still in the world to do that. Can you explain our audience a little bit more in that direction?
Sure. Yes, I think, and that's something that our board members have really stressed, I think, in some of our sessions in the last couple of years, is that we want to make sure that our claims are backed by international standards that are these standards that you should be looking at when you're touching on different components of sustainability, right? So that's why I think it's so important to say, for example, we report our performance in a package in a way that's called an integrated report, right? So our financial statements come together with our sustainability report in what's known as an integrated report, and that has a set of principles, and it's governed by an institution that really is at the forefront of how companies should be reporting on the cross between sustainability and the business results, right? And risk and material aspects, etc. But not only that, there's a number of indicators which are regulated by another institution called the Global Reporting Initiative. And then we also verify third-party verification through typically the big four companies, audit firms in the world. We verify third-party our information. So I think the first thing, Christian, is that in general, I'm not talking only carbon, but in general, it's important to make sure that what you're saying is verified and is audited or is meeting these standards that are considered the leading standard globally. And I think that's why we're so focused in being part of these organizations and these ratings and these initiatives that are predominantly, I'd say, Northern Hemisphere, yet we believe that is the gold standard today, and therefore we are making sure that we're there. When it comes to carbon, I mentioned briefly about this project that's being developed by the GHG Protocol, and in fact, although net zero is sort of this word that everybody's using today, there is no way of measuring and reporting on net zero yet for a company. Okay, so that's why at CMPC we've reported on emissions so far. We have a rough idea of what our forests capture, what we can store through our products, but we have not gone ahead to claim anything because the methodologies and the guidance for that doesn't exist yet. We're in that advisory committee with exactly the purpose of really being on top of the new guidelines as soon as they come out, piloting and testing them, understanding them. So we want to make sure that we're some of the first companies in our sector that are applying the new standards, and eventually, if we can actually get, certified or we can use that claim, we certainly will at the right time.
Thank you, Nicolas. Well, we still have 1 minute if anyone wants to make a quick question or clarify anything.
Yes.
Valeria, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Valeria Riva from Carte Group Spain. Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to know if pure tissue paper is more sustainable than recycled tissue paper, because more and more we have clients who demand for recycled toilet products, and we tell them that recycled paper is less sustainable because you have to use chemicals and you have to use colorants. But I would like to know what's your point of view and if there are studies that back up that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. It's a tough question, and it's not a binary answer. It's not yes or no, unfortunately, because I know you wish to have an answer that's a straightforward answer to your clients. But in fact, we at Softys, we produce paper with different percentages of recycled, depending on the type of product, depending on market prices, depending on other things. Through the pandemic, we had a huge shortage, for example, of recovered paper and board in Chile and in Latin America. Many municipalities, schools, etc., shut down for over a year and a half, and therefore companies have to do adjustments to their recipes when it comes to what goes into tissue paper. So the first thing I think to understand is that it's a dynamic recipe and might have at certain times a little more, a little less of recycled content. When we think about a sustainable product, are we just looking at to how much recycled content it has, or are we interested in how much water it uses or how much waste it produces, and so forth? So the short answer is that unfortunately there's many dimensions at which I could actually judge whether or not a product is sustainable. And it really depends on your audience. So I would say my suggestion is, if your concern is around recycled paper or waste, the waste issue in the world, you can focus on that dimension and provide better answers. But that does not give you any guarantee over other dimensions, which might have to do with chemical use or water use or energy intensity, et cetera, certified content of your virgin pulp. So the complexity here is that to have a claim of a sustainable product, I think, is a claim that nobody should be doing today. What you can say is, I can highlight certain attributes in my product that I believe are particularly better than what's out there in the market. There are certain certifications. For example, let's say we want to look at energy. If I had, a renewable energy plant right next to my plant, I could actually claim that there was no fossil fuels burnt in the production of that tissue paper, right? So that's a statement I could actually do, and there's certifications, global standards that are widely recognized to make those claims on your product. But there is no such thing as saying this is a sustainable product. What you might start seeing in the future is, just like food products have this sort of nutritional information label, and it goes through what's the protein and the carbohydrates and the sugars and the cholesterol and all these different components. It just shows you sort of the performance of that product throughout a number of different dimensions. You, as the consumer or as the client, will be the judge of what are those critical aspects for you, right? So I think that's a way of thinking of this in parallel to that, because really the claim of a sustainable product, I don't think we certainly don't do that claim. We can speak to what the raw materials are, what we're doing in energy, what we're doing in water, but we will never claim that we are producing a sustainable product. So I hope that helps. It's a complicated question, but I think a way of narrowing this down is starting to focus on, okay, so what does my audience really care about? Let's isolate the rest. Let's make it clear that looking at this specific doesn't give you any guarantee over the other aspects. You could be actually doing very poorly in other aspects and doing very well in that which you're focusing on. But that's just the dynamics of where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Christian,
Nicolas.
I still have a few more minutes, so I don't know if there are more questions and people.
We are 4 minutes past, but if you have a few more minutes, would be great. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Depending on the audience. So, is there any other question? Anything you would like to clarify from the pulp side, from the Madera side, wood side? I mean, no. Well, I think we're good then. So, as I said at the beginning, so this is the first webinar of sustainability that we have. We can call it as a success. So we had more than 30 people attending, and we will certainly have another one again. Probably we need to define how often, but we will definitely let you know what the next webinar will be and when. So thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much to the audience, to everyone for attending. And if you have any question, you can always ask us via email, and we will be happy to respond to you. Okay? All right. Well, have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.